Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today our commander is Aloy, Savior of Meridian. I've never played the Horizon games, but they seem cool, and I believe a little bit of reading has caught me up. Without serious spoilers, Aloy is the protagonist of the series, a warrior of the Nora tribe who begins as an outcast before proving herself as a brave, and later being anointed as a seeker. This allows her to leave the sacred lands of the Nora to uncover the mysteries of the setting and to save her people. The more she explores and investigates the mechanical enemies she encounters, the more she learns about the current state of the world, and the closer she comes to the final truths of her tale. I'm excited to share what I put together for Aloy, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I built a deck around it in the first place. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play the game. So let's talk about our commander. Aloy, Savior of Meridian, is a 3/5 legendary human warrior for 3 and Simic mana, 3 a green and a blue. It has vigilance and reach, and it says, in you, all things are possible. Whenever one or more artifact creatures we control attack, we discover X, where X is the greatest power among those attacking artifact creatures. Discover means to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card with that mana value or less. We can either cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it in our hand, and then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order. This is a pretty sweet card. A Simic commander caring about artifact creatures is an unusual combination on its face, but attacking with high power creatures and getting free value from discovering are both right at home in these colors. Aloy has a solid set of stats for her mana value, as well as 2 keywords that suggest she's a bit of a defensive commander, getting in for damage when she can while keeping us protected in the meantime. And while she does, we want an army of bots to act as our serious offensive line, simultaneously trundling in and helping Aloy to follow the trail and find the path forward. So that's what we have here. Fully 40 cards in this deck are artifact creatures of some sort. Some of them are meant to give us value in the form of ramp or removal or card draw, but most are about swinging in and hitting hard. We have some wrinkles to our list, of course. Vehicles with oversized powers that don't require us to risk our native creatures in the process, spacecraft that reward us while we station them up before becoming big flyers, and even some token generation to give us extra bodies we can use in our fights. And sure, we want to do damage with our battle bots, but we're also fine if our opponents want to block. As long as we attack, our commander gives us a free card in play or in hand. A lot of times that means an extra creature to shore up our defenses until we attack with it next time, but sometimes it means a surprise source of evasion, a synergy piece, even a planeswalker. We have spells at every mana value up to 11, so that we'll always have a hit on our hands, and plenty of ways to pump up our creatures so that we have enough power to dig deeply when we discover, as well as to trade profitably in combat. Like Aloy, we use every part of the scavenge technology we find to advance our plans. We build up our team, both in terms of bodies and in bulk, and our discoveries keep our hand and our board full as only a Simic deck can. No matter how our opponents spread to stop us, we'll find our way past their blockades to unearth the secret pathways to our victory. Nowhere is forbidden to us, so we follow the clues and we use them to make strategic choices that'll lead us to the end game. And once we're there, we find that all things truly are possible, and all lands can be home, from the distant horizon to the prime meridian. You'll enjoy this deck if you want to try a synergistic strategy in an unexpected pair of colors, or if you enjoy knowing that every time you act against your enemies, you learn something about yourself as well. So as usual, this Mox build list that we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section, full of cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which for me did not make the cut. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you like what I've done here and you want to build out one particular part of it or another, or if you really like this card and you want to go in a different direction, even in just a slight way, that considering section is a great place for you to begin when you build your own Aloy, Savior of Meridian deck. So, let's begin with the most important section of our deck, our bots. These are all artifact creatures that either do things for us that help each other, that can just swing in and be high-powered creatures to trigger Aloy, or that maybe act as little bits of utility for us, starting with Haywire Might, which is a little bit of that last one. This is a single generic mana for a 1/1 artifact creature, Insect, that says when it dies, we gain 2 life, and we can pay a green and sacrifice it to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. So the Haywire Might, at the very least, we can attack with it and get some value from that. We have several cards in this deck that are mana value 1, so Aloy is going to be able to trigger on the Might as well and get us something, even if we're having to discover most of the way through our deck in the process. And if it dies in combat, no big deal because we gain 2 life off of it, but we really want this in here as a way to deal with non-creature artifacts or enchantments because it lets us, exile something. If someone gets out their Doubling Season or their Panharmonicon, both of those are a great thing for us to hit with the Might, and in the process of sacrificing it and killing or exiling their non-creature artifact or enchantment, we gain that life. Not bad. Chrome Dome is next. This is from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, and it's great in this deck. 2 generic mana for a 1/3 artifact creature, Robot Ninja. Neat. Gives all of our other artifact creatures +1/+0. Excellent for us because it pumps up their power, which helps with our discover value that Aloy gives us when we attack with our creatures. And for 5 generic mana, we can make a token that's a copy of another artifact creature we control. Doesn't matter how big it is, we just get a copy of it. It gets haste and we sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So that not only gives us the ability to make a copy of our biggest thing for 5 mana, which our biggest thing might cost quite a bit more than 5 mana, but it also gives us the ability to use that thing even if it's something like the Haywire Might, because we make that copy and we can then sacrifice that Haywire Might copy to get its effect again. It will die and we'll get 2 life, and there we go, because we would have sacrificed it to Chrome Dome's delayed trigger anyway. Pretty cool. Next is Steel Overseer. 2 generic mana for a 1/1 artifact creature, Construct, with tap to put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature you control. Each includes the Overseer itself. So if we get this out on turn 2, on turn 3, we're just pumping up basically our whole team every turn, which means, like I mentioned with Chrome Dome, we're getting better discover values with our creatures when we attack with them since they're constantly getting bigger. Steel Overseer may not be something we're attacking with on its own, but who knows, later on it might be worth it to just swing in with this guy if it's the best option for us. Still totally fine. Brotherhood Vertibird is next. This is a vehicle. For 3 generic mana, we get a star 4 vehicle that has a power equal to the number of artifacts we control. This is sweet. We are running 48 artifacts in this deck. Some of them are artifact lands, which is a big benefit as well, but we're running so many artifacts, this can get absolutely huge. It flies, and it only requires us to crew it for 2. So this is one of the best examples of what I mentioned in the Heart of the Deck part of the video, of one of our vehicles that we can use to get big discover values and a lot of damage, considering it has the evasive ability of flying, without having to worry about losing our own native creatures. Like, we crew this, it becomes a creature, we get our triggers from Aloy, and if our opponents want to block it or destroy it or something, we haven't lost something that's actually a creature on its own, so pretty sweet. Next is Cultivator's Caravan. Love this card. 3 generic mana for a 5/5 vehicle that crews for 3, and is also a Manalith, a 3 mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. So we use this to ramp, we can use this to have a nice surprise blocker, because remember, you can crew at instant speed on your opponent's turn. We can use this to trigger Aloy, because it will be attacking as a 5/5 artifact creature. Lots to do here with the Caravan. Iron Spider Stark Upgrade, from obviously the Spider-Man set, is a 3 generic mana, 2/3 legendary artifact creature Spider Hero with Vigilance. Whew, lot to say. We can tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature and or vehicle we control, so that's a little bit better than our Steel Overseer. We can just put those counters on the Vertibird before we have crewed it, and on the Cultivator's Caravan as well, that kind of thing. We can also, with those counters, pay 2 and remove 2 1/1 counters from among artifacts we control to draw a card. So a little bit of card draw, especially after we've used this once. And this second ability, or last ability I should say, does not require us to tap Iron Spider, which means we can hopefully tap the spider, get counters on our things, And before we untap with it, either right after or during an opponent's turn or whatever it may be, we can pay 2 mana and draw a card by removing 2 of those counters we just put on things. And in all likelihood, with the amount of artifact creatures and vehicles we have in this deck, we're going to have even more counters than those 2 that we removed. So do we do this again? Do we leave some counters on? Whatever we want to do. Plus, having Vigilance lets us attack with it, then tap it to put counters on itself as well as everything else. Pretty good. Liberator Urza's Battlethopter. Very cool synergy in this deck. 3 generic mana for a 1/2 legendary artifact creature, Thopter, with a big face on it for some reason. Urza's a ridiculous person. It has flash and it has flying, and it lets us cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. So being able to flash things in is very strong for us. Get to surprise our opponents, get to get in with big creatures the turn after we flash them in. Maybe we flash them in on our opponent to the right's end step, and then surprise attack with them. Seems pretty good. And whenever we cast a spell, any spell, if the amount of mana we spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator's power, we put a 1/1 counter on Liberator. So Liberator itself even gets bigger. And since it is a flyer, we can, at the very least, trigger Aloy's Discover ability, or Discover triggered ability with Liberator pretty easily. So pretty nice. Lumbering Worldwagon. I really like this card. This is 2 and a green for a star 4 vehicle with power equal to the number of lands we control. Kind of unusual, but still solid for us. It has crew 4, so a little bit difficult to crew, but not hard when we have enough lands to play out bigger and bigger creatures. And when it enters or attacks, we get to Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So in all likelihood, this is going to come out and have power and toughness 4/4 because we will have probably 3 lands in play, and it'll find us another one when it enters. We can crew it pretty soon. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger, letting us discover more and more and find more basics to play out more big things. Cool. Master of Ethereum is next. 2 and a blue for a star artifact creature Vidalcan Wizard with power and toughness each equal to the number of artifacts we control. Very, very cool. Just gets huge for us and gets a lot of discover value from Aloy, all while giving all of our other artifact creatures +1/+1, just a constant lord effect for our artifact creatures. Great. Sai Master Thopterist is next. 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human artificer that says whenever we cast an artifact spell, we make a Thopter, a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So remember, even if we're only attacking with a 1/1 Thopter, we're still going to get to discover with Aloy. We're just only going to discover into something, mana value 1. So we can either put it in our hand or cast it, whatever we find. We don't have an infinite number of 1-drop spells in this deck, but we can find plenty of them, and we have lots of ways to pump up those Thopters, from the Master of Ethereum's Lord effect to things like Iron Spider or Steel Overseer, putting counters on things, Chrome Dome, giving a +1/+0 to all of our artifact creatures. So yeah, those Thopters might not be just the 1/1s for long. And for 1 and a blue, we can sacrifice 2 artifacts, including those Thopters we're making, to draw a card. Thanks, Sai. Sledge Class Siege Ship is next. This is 2 and a green for a 4/5 spacecraft with Station. If you haven't seen Station before, the way this works is, at sorcery speed, we can tap another creature we control to put a number of charge counters on the Siege Ship equal to the tapped creature's power. And then, once we've done that, we have stationed it. Cool. But it doesn't mean anything for the Siege Ship until there are at least 7 counters on it. The 7 charge counters, and at that point, it becomes a 4/5 flyer that says whenever it attacks, we can put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. That's technically ramped. We might have a massive 10 mana creature in our hand. We just attack with our 4/5 flyer, and not only do we discover 4 from that, but we get our 10 mana creature directly into play. So this is not a huge boost to us early on, but it's not also that hard to get up to 7 for the Siege Ship. So yeah, pretty fun. And a 4/5 flyer, again, flying in this deck is very powerful. It lets us attack with our artifact creatures without having to necessarily risk losing them in combat, unless our opponent themselves has flyers. And if they do, we just attack a different opponent. Next up is Thunderous Velocipede, another Ether Drift vehicle. 1 and double green for a 5/5 vehicle with crew 3 and Trample. Crew 3 is great because it means Aloy can crew this. It says each other vehicle and creature we control enters with an additional 1/1 counter on it if its mana value is 4 or less. Otherwise, it enters with an additional 3 1/1 counters on it. So all of our little stuff comes in with a counter, all of our big stuff comes in with 3 counters. Everything's bigger. Aloy's Discover triggers are a higher Discover value. Great. Love the Velocipede. Uthros Research Craft is another spacecraft. This is 2 and a blue for a 0/8 spacecraft with station. If we station it up to 3 charge counters, it still isn't an artifact creature, but it suddenly has an ability. And that ability is whenever we cast an artifact spell, we draw a card and we put a counter on the research craft. So pretty great. All we have to do is station this with Aloy or any other 3 or more power creature, basically right away. And now we have a way to make all of our artifact spells replace themselves by just drawing off the craft. And that puts a charge counter on the craft. Really cool. Then it does take a while to get up to 12 charge counters, but this is a pretty good way to do it. Once we do have that, it's a flying 0/8 that gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control. So it's sort of like the Vertibird, except it's a 0/8 instead of a 0/4. Or rather, not a 0. It's sort of like a star 8, based on all the number of artifacts we control. And that includes itself, so it's at least a 1/8 from the start. Very cool. Next is Filigree Attendant. 2 and double blue for a star 3 homunculus with flying. It's an artifact creature that has power equal to the number of artifacts we control. So again, it's sort of like the Vertibird, but this one, we don't have to crew it in order to get it going. It flies. It's going to have a big power. We can use it to, maybe we get its power really big and we immediately bump up the Uthros Research Craft to a high number. If this is a power of 12, we can get it all the way up to 12 charge counters right away. Yeah, several different effects like this, all of which are great in this deck. Joyra's Familiar is next. This is a great owl. It's a 4 generic mana, 2/2 artifact creature bird with flying that gives all of our historic spells a discount of 1 generic mana. So historic means all of our spells that are artifacts, that are legendary, or that are sagas. Now we don't have any sagas in this deck, but we have a lot of artifact spells and plenty of legendary spells. In fact, over 50 cards in this deck, beyond Joyra's Familiar, are historic spells. So this is a huge discount for so many things that we want to care about over the course of the game. Love the bird. Plus it's a flyer. We can use this to just discover for 2 if that's all we need to do. Yeah. Next is the Sad Robot. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem. When it enters, we Rampant Growth, and when it dies, we draw a card. So we don't mind if we're attacking with this just to get the Aloy trigger, because when we do, we'll get the Aloy trigger, obviously, and look for, get to discover at value 2. And if we happen to lose the Sad Robot, well, we're going to get a card anyway from it dying. And in the process, it came in and Rampant Growthed us. So yeah, love the Sad Robot in this deck. The Indomitable is next. The Indomitable is the ship from Ixalan. Am I losing my mind? The Indomitable is Beckett Brass's ship, I believe? Yeah. Admiral Beckett Brass, this is her ship, I believe so. It's escaping me what Captain Vraska's ship is. The Belligerent, there you go. Vraska's ship is the Belligerent. This is Beckett Brass's ship. We got there. Okay. For 2 and double blue, we get a 6/6 legendary artifact vehicle with Trample. 6/6 Trample from Ixalan is a Dreadmaw. That's crazy. And this crews for 3, so we can have Aloy crew it. And it says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So this is, for the same cost, Coastal Piracy, or Reconnaissance Mission. It makes it so all of our creatures have Curiosity and will draw us cards when we do damage with them, including the Indomitable itself. And again, it's a 6/6 Trampler. Great. But what if it goes to the graveyard? Well, we can cast it from our graveyard as long as we control 3 or more tapped pirates and or vehicles. We don't have any pirates in this deck, unfortunately, even though the Indomitable lets all of our creatures seem like pirates. But we do have several vehicles. It's not likely we're getting the Indomitable back but with the amount of card draw we have in this deck, you never know. We might be able to get out some vehicles, attack with them, or tap them down somehow, and get the Indomitable back into play and get back our Coastal Piracy effect. Pretty good either way. The Regalia is next. This is from the Final Fantasy decks, or Final Fantasy standard set, actually. For 4 generic mana, we get a 4/4 legendary artifact vehicle with haste and crew 1. So we can crew this as long as we've got any creatures in play, essentially. When it attacks, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a land card. Then we put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. So we get to just get a free land. It doesn't even have to be a basic land, but we don't get to choose which one it will be. It's the first one in our library. But since we're doing a lot of discovering in this deck, flipping over the top of our deck until we find the thing we want is something we're pretty used to, so no big deal. The Regalia coming out immediately, giving us the ability to crew it, discover for 4 thanks to Aloy, and find a land seems great. Thopter Spy Network is next. Now this is not an artifact. It's 2 and double blue for an enchantment, but what it does is it gives us a Thopter at the start of our upkeep if we control an artifact. We have so many artifacts in this deck, even if we have just an artifact land. Thopter Spy Network is going to mean that we start our turn with a 1/1 Thopter in play. We can't attack with it right away because of course it has summoning sickness, but as soon as we're able to attack with it, we've got the ability to just swing it in the air. So this is kind of our, I don't want to really liken it to Bitter Blossom, but it feels like it plays a similar way, giving us that 1/1 at the start of our turn that we are able to use the one from the last turn right away. Pretty good. In addition, whenever 1 or more artifact creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So this is not the same as the Coastal Piracy effect from the Indomitable, even for artifact creatures, because it says 1 or more. So if we do damage to opponent A with like 4 of our creatures, we still only draw 1 card. However, it says to a player. So if we split up our creatures and have them attack multiple opponents, we're going to draw a card for each opponent that our artifact creatures deal combat damage to. So that's a good way to get even more card draw off of this. Traxos, Scourge of Krug is next. From Dominaria 2018, I should say. Original Dominaria is Alpha. We have 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact creature construct. Traxos is a 7/7 trampler that enters tapped and doesn't untap during our untap step, but does untap when we cast a historic spell. So Traxos coming in and being a 7/7 that's tapped, that's fine. In all likelihood, our next turn, or later that same turn, we're going to cast an artifact spell or maybe just a legendary spell, untap Traxos, and then as long as it doesn't have summoning sickness, we attack in and we discover for 7, plus we're attacking with a 7/7 trampler. Great. Next is Darksteel Juggernaut. I just have to say it one time. I hate that every time I see this card, I call it Big Jugs. Sorry, it gets really big and it's a Juggernaut. This is 5 generic mana for a star artifact creature Juggernaut with Indestructible and power and toughness each equal to the number of artifacts we control that attacks each combat if able. So it's just a free way to discover a lot every turn with Aloy, because it's an indestructible attacker. It's always going to be attacking. It's always going to be strong for us. Yeah, love the Darksteel Juggernaut. So next is another big thing. This is a different spacecraft. Dawnsire Sunstar Dreadnought is a 5 generic mana legendary artifact spacecraft with station. And when we station it up to 10 or more, we have an attack trigger that does not require us to attack with Dawnsire. Whenever we attack with anything, Dawnsire deals 100 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. So essentially, unless one of your opponents is going crazy, just going bananas with their counters or something, Dawnsire is going to kill any creature or planeswalker that isn't indestructible and that can be targeted every time we attack, so long as we have 10 charge counters on it. Again, not hard to do. Then we want to keep going with it, because if we get it up to 20 charge counters, it becomes a 20/20 flyer that still retains this attack trigger. We can attack with it, and now it triggers itself. Pretty cool card. And if you would like to build a commander deck around it, check out the video's description for a link to the deck that I built around it when Edge of Eternities was fresh and in standard. Yeah, pretty sweet. Next is Research Thief. This is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 artifact creature Moonfolk Wizard with flash and flying. So we can flash this in if we want to, and it's a nice 3/3 flyer. Again, lots of flyers in this deck so that we can get in and do our get our trigger from Aloy without necessarily risking our creatures in combat against blockers. And Research Thief says, whenever an artifact creature we control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is full-on Coastal Piracy or Curiosity for all of our artifact creatures. Great. Root Wire Amalgam is next. This is from the Brothers War main set. For 5 generic mana, we get a 5/5 artifact creature golem that says pay 3 and double green and sacrifice it to make an XX colorless golem artifact creature token where X is 3 times this creature's power and it gains haste until end of turn, but we can only do this as a sorcery. So normally the idea is we pay 5 for this, we get a 5/5, that's great, maybe we attack with it, or maybe we just pay 3 and double green and sack it, and we now have a 15/15 that has haste until end of turn. And we can attack with that and discover into whatever the next spell is in our deck. Pretty good. It's also true that if the Amalgam is a 5/5 and we put a counter on it, or we have a Lord effect pumping up its power, we're going to get that effect when we make this XX Golem, where X being 3 times the creature's power. It doesn't have to be its base power. So that's pretty good. All of that is pretty solid, but this also has Prototype for 1 and a green. Prototype is a special alternate casting cost, which means if we cast it for its prototype cost, its mana value and its color and its size all change. It becomes a 2-drop, 2/3 that is green. Which means when we activate this, it still has this ability though. We can still pay 5, it's still 5 whether or not we've prototyped it, and we sack it, and if it was a 2/3, we'll make a 6/6 version of it with haste, which is still pretty solid, especially if we spent 2 to get it out, then got out our commander on turn 4 or 5, depending on our ramp situation, after which we sacrifice the Amalgam and get a 6/6, and we can get our triggers off of that as well. It's just a lot more fun to maybe get a 15/15, but it's definitely a removal bait as well. So yeah, the Amalgam is pretty cool for us. Next is Verdurous Gearhulk. This is originally from Kaladesh. 3 and double green for a 4/4 artifact creature construct with trample that enters and lets us distribute 4 1/1 counters among any number of target creatures we control. Now, if we want, this can be a 5 mana 8/8. We just put all of its counters on itself with trample. Or we can pump up some of our other creatures and get even more discover value, I should say, from our commander when we attack with those creatures. Yeah. Cyberdrive Awakener. 5 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature construct with flying that gives all of our artifact creatures flying. This is so good. Again, it protects our creatures. It makes it so we're likelier to get in because unless our opponent is playing, a Flyers deck or an Angels or a Dragons deck, something like that, this is going to mean our board is probably full of Flyers and there's at least one opponent whose board is not. So getting in with our big, huge creatures when they fly, already good for us. Having our other creatures get in with flying, even better. And when this enters, each non-creature artifact we control becomes a 4/4 artifact creature token until end of turn. So our Soul Ring is suddenly a 4/4 flyer, since it's a 4/4 artifact creature and our artifact creatures have flying. And if we didn't tap it already, we can just attack in with it and get a Discover of 4 from our commander. Great. Duplicant is next. 6 generic mana for a 2/4 shapeshifter artifact creature with imprint. When it enters, we can exile target non-token creature. So we can hit our own creatures with this, but what we want to do is get rid of either an opponent's commander, so they can put it back in the command zone, but more to the way the Duplicant actually plays, we want to get the biggest, scariest creature in play. Either one that has a devastating ability that we don't want our opponents to have, or especially one with a huge power and toughness. That's what we really are looking for here. Because when we exile it, as long as that card is exiled with this creature, and it's a creature card, The creature has power, toughness, and creature type, or this creature has power, toughness, and creature types of the last creature card exiled with it, and it's still a shapeshifter. So if we were to take Ghalta Primal Hunger and exile it with Duplicant, we exile it under the Duplicant, and Ghalta, assuming it wasn't our opponent's commander and therefore doesn't go to the command zone, Ghalta will stay under the Duplicant, and Duplicant will be a 12/12. It does not say it gains the abilities of that creature, so it won't be a 12/12 trample unless we have a way to make it a trampler. But it's the biggest creature on the battlefield, presumably, so now it's not under someone else's control, and our Duplicant is just as big. And we can get great value from our commander's Discover trigger whenever we attack with our now big Duplicant. Kappa Cannoneer absolutely goes ham in this deck. This is 5 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature Turtle Warrior with Improvise. Improvise means we can tap our mana for this, but we can also tap artifacts that we control, even if they don't tap for mana, and each one of them pays for 1 generic mana toward the Kappa Cannoneer's cost. Pretty sweet for us if we have a bunch of creatures that we don't need to attack or block with, or just other artifacts sitting around. Maybe we have a swarm of Thopters at this point, and we don't care about tapping 5 of them in order to pay a single blue for the Kappa Cannoneer. Anyway, it's a 4/4 with Ward 4, and when it enters, and when any other artifact we control enters, when it or another artifact we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on this creature, and it can't be blocked this turn. So once the Kappa Cannoneer is in play, the likelihood that it's going to ever be blockable again is so low in this deck. We have any artifact we control enter. It can be an artifact spell that we've cast, it can be a token we're making, it can be an artifact land. Anytime any of those enters, we put a 1/1 counter on the Cannoneer, we attack with it, it's not going to be blocked, so it's even better than if it were flying, and it's going to trigger Aloy. Love this card here. Next is Sharding Sphinx. This is 4 and double blue for a 4/4 artifact creature Sphinx with flying, and a really cool art. Just really, what's going on with this? Really like it. It says whenever an artifact creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we can create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying. This is unlike the other Thopters because it's blue, but otherwise it's just a Thopter. So it gives us the ability to swing in the way we've been wanting to this whole time, get our Discover from the Sphinx or any of our other artifact creatures that are attacking, whichever one has the highest power. And then each of our artifact creatures that does damage is giving us a 1/1 flyer that can block while we're waiting to untap with our big creatures, that can swing in next turn, that we can tap down for the Kappa Cannoneer, or anything else we might want to do. Just an extra reward for each of our artifact creatures that has attacked and done damage to a player, because that's what we want to do with our artifact creatures anyway, just attack in every turn. Next is Meteor Golem. Love Meteor Golem. 7 generic mana for a 3/3 artifact creature golem. When it enters, we blow up a non-land permanent an opponent controls. It's that simple. They reprinted it in Foundations, it's dirt cheap, and it just does a lot of work. Even being able to Discover for 3 in this deck is very good. So when we attack with this after we've had it come in, we're getting some value out of it, and we're denying our opponent something as we kill the scariest thing in play that isn't a land. Great. Mirror Battlesphere is next. 7 generic mana for a 4/7 artifact creature Mirror Construct that says when it enters, we make 4 1/1 colorless Mirror artifact creature tokens. So we get 4/7 and 4 little 1/1s. Pretty good. But we're never going to use these 1/1s to attack, because whenever the Battlesphere attacks, we can tap any number of untapped Mirror we control. So we're going to tap all 4 of these. If we do, this creature gets a power bonus until end of turn equal to the number of Mirror we tapped, and it does that same amount of damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So we get burn from the Battlesphere, we get to make it bigger by making these little mirror, and what's especially nice is attack triggers happen all at the same time. They go on the stack at the same time. So when the Battlesphere attacks, if we have Aloy in play, we can stack it so that Aloy's trigger will resolve second. What that means is we have this resolve first, we tap our mirror, making this into an 8/7, doing 4 damage to the player or planeswalker that we're attacking with it, but most importantly, making it, like I say, making it an 8/7. Then Aloy's trigger will resolve, see that the Battlesphere is now an 8 power creature, and we'll Discover for 8 with it. Sweet. Omega Heartless Evolution. This is another Final Fantasy card. 5 a green and a blue for an 8/8 legendary artifact creature, robot, with a wave cannon. When it enters, for each opponent, we tap up to 1 target non-land permanent that opponent controls, and we put a number of stun counters on each of those permanents equal to the number of non-basic lands we control, and we gain that much life. So this is a little bit of a temporary removal effect. We have it come in, we tap down some big things. Those big things might have been creatures, so we just get to scoot in and attack those opponents without necessarily worrying about our creatures being blocked and being lost in the process. We get to only do it for one opponent, up to 1 target non-land permanent for each opponent, but still nice, and we gain a little life off of it. Also, it's an 8/8 for 7, so it's going to keep just discovering for us over and over, and that's pretty sweet. Next is Thought Monitor. Thought Monitor is 6 and a blue for a 2/2 artifact creature construct with affinity for artifacts. This is not the same as Improvise. It's instead of having to tap down our artifacts to help pay for the cost of it, Thought Monitor just costs 1 less for each artifact we control. So a lot of the times in this deck, if we don't draw this early on, this is a 2/2 for 1. We have so many artifacts. It's so good. It has a flying, so it's a Wind Drake, a 2/2 flyer. And when it enters, we draw 2 cards. Sweet. Next is Extinguisher Battleship. It's another one of our spacecraft. This is 8 generic mana for a 10/10 spacecraft. Actually, it's not a 10/10 quite yet. It's a spacecraft that does have station, and it will become a 10/10 flying trampler as long as we get 5 counters on it. 5 charge counters is not hard to get with all the creatures we have, except when it enters, we destroy a non-token permanent, or a non-creature permanent, and then do 4 damage to each creature. So this is one of our board wipes. It is, I think, our only board wipe, in fact. 4 damage to each creature will kill some of our creatures, but it will likely kill most of the other creatures on the battlefield as well. And anything it wasn't going to kill, we can just have it destroy when it first comes in. Then, with any of our creatures that have survived, notably, our commander has 5 toughness, we can start crewing the battleship, or rather stationing it, making it into a 10/10 flying trampler, which is great for subsequent turns when we can attack with it, get a good discover with Aloy, and then it's a 10/10 trampler flyer. Great. Next is Maelstrom Colossus. 8 generic mana for a 7/7 artifact creature golem with a single line, or a single word of rules text, Cascade. Cascade's not quite the same as Discover, but it feels similar. When we cast this spell while it's still on the stack, we exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card that costs less, so 7 mana or less. We can either cast it without paying its mana cost, or it just stays in exile, as opposed to Discover, which would let us put it in our hand. And then all the other cards that we exiled go on the bottom in a random order. So even though we don't get to keep the card if we don't want to cast it, and even though it's not the same number as the cost of the Colossus, it does resolve before the Colossus does, which is pretty okay. So a free extra spell that's 7 mana or less when we cast this Colossus is great, because it gives us then a 7/7 Colossus that we can attack with and trigger Aloy to Discover for 7. So very simple, a lot of fun, love it. Inkwell Leviathan is next. 7 blue for a 7/11 artifact creature Leviathan with Trample, Island Walk, and Shroud. That's all it's got. Island Walk means if the defending player has any islands, the Leviathan can't be blocked. It's just unblockable. Amazing. We don't get to see land walk abilities that often in Commander anymore, so blue is still a pretty popular color in Commander. So if you've got an opponent with an island, this Leviathan is going to trundle in, do 7 damage to them, have given us the ability to Discover for 7 when it attacked, and even if they, sacrifice their island in response so that they can block, it still tramples and has 11 toughness. This is a crazy powerful attacker. And it has Shroud, which means it can't be the target of spells or abilities. That means from us as well. If we have something that puts a 1/1 counter on each of our creatures, we can put a counter on the Leviathan. If it says to put counters on target creature, like the Verdurous Gearhulk does, we can't put it on the Leviathan because we don't have the ability to target it any more than our opponents do. Shroud is like hexproof, but every player is affected, including the controller. So yeah, pretty big, but it does a lot for us. Speaking of big stuff, we have Triplicate Titan. Triplicate Titan is 9 generic mana for a 9/9 artifact creature golem with flying, vigilance, and trample. When it dies, it breaks into 3 parts. It makes a 3/3 golem with flying, a 3/3 golem with vigilance, and a 3/3 golem with trample. So 9 mana, attacking with it. It has a 9 power, so it's going to discover for 9. If it dies, we get some 3/3s, any one of which it attacks, and we discover for 3. But a 9/9 flying, vigilance, trample usually does a lot of work in a game. Ancient Stone Idol is 10 generic mana for a 12/12 artifact creature golem with flash. Now why does it have flash? Because it costs 1 generic less for each attacking creature. So we want to cast this during combat. There's 3 ways we can do that. We can either attack ourselves, and maybe we attack with 4 or 5 creatures, and so this is getting discounted to by 4 or 5 to like a 5 or 6 mana. We can flash it in. It's not attacking, but it's a great blocker. It's just going to sit there and be there for us. Second way we can do this is when someone attacks us. We have opponent A attacking us with their 6 creatures. Well, Ancient Stone Idol is going to have a discount for each attacking creature because it doesn't say each attacking creature you control. So we cast it for 4, flash it in, and now we've got a 12/12 blocker that our opponent didn't expect. That's pretty great. We can also flash this in when opponent A attacks opponent B. We don't have to be involved in the combat at all because it just matters that the creatures are attacking. So we see opponent A make a billion tokens and attack for, with 20 of their little scoot swarms to opponent B. Before opponent B blocks, or after they block, or after damage even, during the end of combat step, doesn't matter, we notice that there are more than 10 attacking creatures, so we flash in Ancient Stone Idol for free. Pretty great. So we get a 12/12 Trampler that, just in case we need it, when it dies, it leaves behind a 6/12 Colorless Construct artifact creature token with trample. So it leaves behind essentially the same thing as itself with half as much power. Amazing. We next have Darksteel Colossus. 11 generic mana for an 11/11 that they did reprint in Foundations. It's an artifact creature golem. It has trample, it is indestructible, and if it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, if we discard it, it can't be destroyed, obviously, but even if it loses it indestructible from, let's say, a Shadow Spear or something, and then is destroyed, if it is milled, doesn't matter. Anywhere, if it ends up in a graveyard from anywhere, we reveal it and shuffle it into our library instead. Crazy. So yeah, Darksteel Colossus, it's going to give us all of our best triggers, since 11 is where we cap out for our mana value in this deck, and it's an 11 trampling indestructible creature. Yeah, also, look at this little head. Love it. Finally, we have Metalwork Colossus. This is an 11/11 10/10 artifact creature construct that costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature artifacts we control. Now, non-creature artifacts does mean all of the bots we've just seen don't count because they are not creatures, right? Wrong, because we have several different artifacts in this section that are vehicles and or spacecraft. A vehicle is not a creature until it is crewed, and then it's a creature only until end of turn. A spacecraft is not a creature until it has been stationed to the point that it has enough charge counters on it that it has a power and toughness and then becomes a creature. So Metalwork Colossus can be quite heavily discounted for us by any of the cards of those that I just mentioned, as well as any of the non-creature artifacts, of which we have plenty in this deck. But I also want to make mention that it's the total mana value. So if we have 4 3-drops that happen not to be creatures, Metalwork Colossus is free. As long as those 3-drops are non-creature artifacts, that's a total mana value of 12 of them, so it's 0. We can't go below 0, obviously. It's not going to give us mana, but this discount can be terrific for us and get us a 10/10 we can attack with. It doesn't have any evasive abilities, but it sure does trigger Aloy quite well. And we can sacrifice 2 artifacts to return it from our graveyard to our hand, where it continues to get this cost reduction. Pretty cool. That is our bots section. Oh, hey, did you just like the video? Nice. thank you. I'm just kidding. You don't have to like the video if you don't want. I appreciate you being here with me either way. Thanks for watching. Anyway, there's more where that came from. I want to talk now about these categories of support for our game plan, starting with card advantage. As usual, I have used the word draw as a tag for these cards. It doesn't mean they all draw us a card. It just gives us a little bit more access to cards that we can cast or use. For example, Bushwhack. Bushwhack is a single green for a sorcery that lets us either Lay of the Land, search our library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle, or have one of our creatures fight a creature we don't control. We fight a bush, or we whack something. So it's removal, it's a way to swap it out for a basic land that we can then play maybe that turn if we haven't made our land drop yet. Whatever flexibility we need, we've got it. Thanks for reprinting this, Foundations. Adaptive Omni Tool is next. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 3 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each artifact we control. So it makes our equipped creature huge. Pretty sweet. Unfortunately, we can't put this on our commander and get the big discover from it, because our commander is not herself an artifact creature. But what we can do is put this on our commander, attack with our then vigilant commander, get a huge attacker from that since it gives a bonus based on all of our artifacts, and we're still going to get to discover if we've also attacked with any other artifact creatures based on the highest power of all the artifact creatures we attack with. So yeah, Adaptive Omni Tool could be great for us either way, even if we don't put it on an artifact creature. And when the equipped creature attacks, we can look at the top 6 cards of our library, and we can reveal an artifact from among them and put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. That artifact card, it doesn't say artifact spell card, artifact permanent card, it just says artifact card. So we can get one of our artifact lands, we can get the best vehicle we see, or artifact creature, whatever it may be. With as many artifacts as we have in this deck, looking at the top 6 means we're probably getting pretty good selection of what we're looking for here. Yeah, free card every turn when we attack with the equipped creature. Garruk's Uprising is next. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment that does 3 things. For one, it gives all of our creatures trample, just all the time. All of our huge, our 10/10 Metalwork Colossus that doesn't have any evasion, well, it does now. Our Cyberdrive Awakener, giving all of our creatures flying, maybe makes our big creatures able to attack. Trample makes them definitely do some damage, assuming our opponent doesn't have some kind of massive wall of flying blockers. It also draws us a card when it enters if we control a creature power 4 or greater. Not hard for us to do. But what if we get this in and then we play big creatures after it's come in? Well, whenever a creature we control with power 4 or greater enters, we also draw a card. So this is it replacing itself, assuming we have something big once it gets in, and then giving us repeated card draw every time we have our big creatures enter thereafter. Pretty good. Iron Spire, we've already seen, lets us pay 2 and remove 2 of our 1/1 counters that you've seen. We have a bunch of ways to put on our creatures, including Iron Spider itself, to draw a card. Sai lets us pay 2 and sack 2 artifacts to draw a card. The Research Craft, once we have stationed it up to 3, lets us draw a card every time we cast an artifact spell. Plus, we put a charge counter on it. Next, from the Doctor Who decks, we have Osgood Operation Double. I really like this card. This is 2 and double blue for a 2/2 legendary human alien shapeshifter. So I want to make mention, just like our commander, Osgood is historic, even though Osgood is not an artifact. It says whenever we cast a spell, we make a token copy of it, except it isn't legendary. So we get 2 Osgoods. That's Osgreat. We can tap either one of them, or both, for a generic mana, or for a colorless mana, but we can only use that mana to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact. Pretty great. We've got lots of artifacts in this, so this is solid ramp for us for those artifacts. And it has a paradox ability. Whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, we investigate. Investigate means we make a clue. It's an artifact with pay 2, sack it, and draw a card. So these clues are artifacts and will add to our affinity count. They are something we can tap to improvise if we want to do that, or we can just crack them for clues, or for cards. That's great. Notably though, casting a spell from anywhere other than your hand, what does that sound like? To me, it sounds like every time we discover with Aloy. Or, I guess with a Maelstrom Colossus, when we would cast that Cascaded spell. Yeah, Osgood is going to be able to give us probably 2 clues every turn, because both the original Osgood and the copy of it are going to let us investigate whenever we attack with our artifact creatures while we have Aloy in play, and we get to discover into something. And then if we need to cast more artifact spells, both of our Osgoods can tap for mana. Crazy. Padim, Consul of Innovation, is next. 3 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary Vidalcan Artificer that gives all of our artifacts hexproof. That's pretty sweet. Good protection right there. And at the beginning of our upkeep, if we control the artifact with the greatest mana value or tied for the greatest mana value, we draw a card. So a free extra card during our beginning phase, assuming we have the biggest artifact in play, which we might not, but a lot of the time we will, because that's what we're going for. So yeah. We've seen our Solemn Simulacrum. It dies and draws us a card. The 4th Doctor is, surprisingly, another Doctor Who card. This is 2, a green and a blue, for a 4/4 legendary Time Lord Doctor that lets us look at the top card of our library at any time, and gives us the ability to, once each turn, play a historic land or cast a historic spell from the top of our library, and when we do, we make a food token. So, casting historic spells, pretty great on its face. We already have over 50 cards that benefit from that. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think there are only 8 cards in the deck that are 8 non-land cards that are non-historic, that aren't either artifacts or legendary. But this also lets us play historic lands. So I think there are 4 of those, because we have 4 artifact lands. So yeah, this is basically half of our deck. This is more than half of our deck, sorry. Yeah, a lot of ways for us to play things off the top of our library and at least see what we have, at least once each turn. That's good advantage. The Indomitable is Coastal Piracy on a vehicle, pretty good. Thopter Spy Network lets us draw a card when we have 1 or more artifact creatures we control dealing combat damage to a player. Research Thief is Coastal Piracy for those artifact creatures itself. Then we have our 1 Planeswalker. This is Vivian Reed. They reprinted her in Foundations, originally from M19, incredible card, really cool character. 3 and double green for a 5 loyalty Vivian Planeswalker, historic, because legendary, that says, +1, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So that is our card advantage. We look at the top, we find a creature or land, that's most of our deck, and then we get to put 1 in our hand, and we're all set. Good. We can also -3 Vivian to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, and if our opponents are just not paying attention, and they let us plus Vivian 3 times and then untap with her, we can -8 Vivian to get an emblem that gives all of our creatures +2/+2, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. This wins games. Just everything's big, everything's trampling, everything's indestructible, and we can block with it too. Yeah, great card. We've seen the Thought Monitor. It enters and we draw 2, and Maelstrom Colossus enters and we cascade into something. It's a free spell. That's card advantage. Yeah. So that is our card advantage section. Let's talk now about our acceleration, which as usual, I've just tagged as ramp. Lady Octopus Inspired Inventor from the Spider-Man set is really cool. This is a 0/2 legendary human scientist villain for a single blue. Whenever we draw our first or second card each turn, we put an Ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus. Ingenuity counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. And then we can tap her, and we can cast an artifact spell from our hand with mana value less than or equal to the number of Ingenuity counters on Lady Octopus without paying its mana cost. So if we get her up to, I don't know, 11 Ingenuity counters, we can tap her and cast our Darksteel Colossus from our hand for free. So every turn, we're getting to cast a free artifact spell from our hand, assuming it has a mana value equal to or less than the number of counters on her. And we're getting a counter on her at least once every turn when we draw our card for the turn. But we, like I've mentioned, have plenty of ways to draw other cards, like we just saw in the last section, so this is likely to get going even faster for us. Pretty cool. Obviously, we're running Soul Ring, 1 generic for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. That is an artifact that taps for mana, so it's a mana rock, and it's our best one. 2 mana, that's what we want. For 1 mana, sounds great. Arcane Signet is next. This is 2 generic mana for a rock that Taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, meaning it taps for blue or for green. Great. Fixes our mana. It's only 2 mana to cast it, which is a 2 mana rock, which is where we want to be. Perfect. Farseek is next. This is the rampant growth for our deck. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So we don't have any plains, swamps, or mountains in this deck, but we do have some islands, both basic and non-basic, and that's why we're running Farseek over actual rampant growth, because it lets us find one of our dual-typed lands. It doesn't matter that Sullen Verdure is a forest. It matters that it's an island, because it's an island forest. Great, we get to find that. It's going to come in tapped maybe anyway. Farseek will just put it in tapped, and now we've got access to not just more blue mana, but also more green. Pretty good. Simic Signet is another 2 mana rock. 2 for an artifact that taps for a green and a blue. It makes 2 mana, but we have to pay a mana into it to activate it at all. So this filters our mana into our colors. That's pretty great. It does mean we need to be a little bit cautious when we tap our mana, because we want to make sure that we have 1 to pay into the Signet in order to get mana out of it at all. Remember, it doesn't tap for any mana on its own unless we put the mana into it first. But then we've tapped 1 source of mana and the Signet to make 2 mana, so yeah, it works for us. Similarly, or maybe better, I guess, I would say better, is Talisman of Curiosity. This is 2 generic mana for an artifact that just taps for colorless, or we can tap it for a green or a blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. We always are. I always try to explain this. Imagine if you had a spell that said you can pay 1 life rather than pay for the blue or green pip on this spell. You would do that every turn, because being able to cast mana or to cast spells for cheaper in order for the cost of paying life is always worth it. The Talisman of Curiosity is sort of like that, because the only times you're not going to tap it for colorless mana, that is to say, the only times you're going to tap it for colored mana are times when doing so is the difference between casting a spell or not. Otherwise, you just tap it for the colorless, and that's fine. But if you need that colored mana, it's always worth the life, unless, of course, that would kill you, you know? So, over the course of a game, are you spending 2, 4, 6 life on the Talisman of Curiosity? That means you've cast 2, 4, 6 spells you weren't otherwise going to be able to cast in that turn, and that's so worth it. So yeah, there you go. We've seen the Cultivator's Caravan and the Lumbering World Wagon. This taps for mana. This rampant growths us when it enters or attacks. We've also seen the Sledge class Siege Ship. It lets us put a creature directly into play when it attacks. That seems great. Osgood and Osgood's token copy tap for colorless mana for our artifact spells or to activate artifacts. Cool. Ovaya, Automech Artisan, is next. This is from Aetherdrift. It's 3 and a green for a 1/2 legendary human artificer that gives each of our creatures that's attacking one of our opponents trample. But not exactly what I just said. It says each creature, not each creature you control. So we need to remind our opponents that if they attack us, that's fine, they can attack us. But if they attack each other, all of their creatures have trample. It applies to our creatures and everyone else's creatures. As long as when those creatures attack, they are attacking someone other than us, great. Trample. In addition, we can pay a green and tap Ovaya to put a creature or vehicle card from our hand onto the battlefield, and if we put an artifact onto the battlefield this way, or an artifact creature, vehicle or artifact creature, we put 2 1/1 counters on it. So most of the time, Ovaya is saying, pay a green and tap me too, and you don't have to pay the cost of any of your artifact creatures or your vehicles, and they'll all come in with 2 1/1 counters. And when they attack, trample. Pretty sweet. The Sad Robot, of course, rampant growths us when it comes in, and the Regalia, rampant growth, or not really rampant growths, sort of cascades into a land, I guess you might call it, whenever it attacks. So yeah, there you go. That is our ramp section. We have one card in our discounts section. Pardon me. Discounts. It's Joyrus Familiar. I separate discounts from ramp because it's not quite the same, and I don't like to run cards that give us a discount unless it would apply to at least 40 other cards in the deck. Joyrus Familiar works for over 50 cards in our deck. It's pretty good. The only cards it doesn't work for that are historic are itself, obviously, and we have Lady Octopus, I believe, is the only 1 mana historic spell that requires colored mana, so Joyous Familiar doesn't have any colorless mana to discount. But yeah, other than that, it's giving us a huge discount in our deck, and it's totally worth running, in addition to being another flyer that we can use to trigger our commander. So, that is our discount section. We have this interaction section next, which again I've just tagged as removal. So Bushwhack gives us the ability to have one of our creatures fight another creature. Seems good. Haywire Might we can sacrifice to exile a non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Rapid Hybridization is a 1 blue instant that destroys a creature, makes it so that creature can't be regenerated, and leaves behind, under that creature's controller's control, a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. So this is sort of our generous gift. It's not my favorite kind of removal spell in these colors. I usually prefer to do something along the lines of, Witness Protection, but this is instant speed, and it's pretty powerful. So yeah, we're running Rapid Hybridization. Next is Collective Resistance. 1 and a green for an instant with Escalate for a single green, meaning we choose one or more of these modes, and we can pay an extra green for each mode chosen beyond the first, and we can choose all of them if we want. So 1 and a green, destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or target creature gets hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. If you think of it as 1 and a green to do one of these two, that's just naturalize. But 1 and double green to do both, and you hit 2 things, pretty great. Or 1 and double green to do either one of these and give one of our things hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, excellent. We can even use this politically because it doesn't say target creature you control. We can say, hey, I know our mutual opponent is targeting your commander with murder. I will save them if you leave me alone for a turn cycle or 2. We can use Collective Resistance that way. And when we do, if they say yes, we just pay a little extra mana into it and blow up some artifacts or enchantments, including ones with the player who we made that deal with. If we want to be a jerk, that's fine. Next is Imprisoned in the Moon. 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker and makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless and causes it to lose all other card types and abilities. So this is a great way to shut down, a scary planeswalker or a big creature in play. But I usually use Imprisoned in the Moon to shut down someone's commander because it hasn't changed zones, so they don't have the ability to put it in the command zone when we do this. Now it's a land that's enchanted with an aura, so unless they have something in their deck that can either interact with their own lands or can interact with enchantments specifically, probably their commander is stuck there. Now they are getting extra mana out of it, but that's all their commander is doing for them. So if you're playing against someone whose deck, like many of my decks, is built with their commander as sort of an engine piece, this can really slow them down and can help you out without being something gross like, Oubliette. Not that I don't like Oubliette, of course. Dawnsire, once it's stationed up to 10, gives us an attack trigger to do 100 damage to a creature or planeswalker. That's going to kill most anything. Vivian can be -3 to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Duplicate exiles a non-token creature. Whichever one we want to get of our opponents, it's just gone forever. Meteor Golem destroys a non-land permanent when it enters. Omega lets us tap things down, 1 thing per opponent, assuming that we have a number of non-basic lands above 0, I guess. Actually, we'll tap things down no matter what, but we get to put stun counters based on the number of non-basic lands we have. And Extinguisher Battleship is a Wrath, doing 4 damage to each creature when it enters, but also letting us destroy a non-creature permanent at the same time. So, for a single mana more than Meteor Golem, we get a board wipe as well, and the ability for it to become a 10/10 Flying Trampler. Wow. That is our removal section. And we've already seen our Wraths. It's Extinguisher Battleship. We've already talked about it. It's very powerful. It at least gives us the ability to clear part of the board. And there you go. I was going to run Aetherize in this deck as well, as a nice instant speed, sort of protective, one-sided board wipe. But I don't think we need it. I think this deck is pretty strong without it. So yeah, that is our Wrath section. We're going to talk now about our supplemental sections for this deck, ways that we help out our game plan that aren't those primary categories of support. Starting with our payoff cards. These are cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway, and we've already seen all of them. The 13th Doctor. We haven't seen the 13th Doctor. Silly me. For 1, a green, and a blue, we get a 2/2 legendary Time Lord Doctor with a Paradox ability. Whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature. A little bit of pump for us every time we discover. Love it. And it has Team TARDIS. At the beginning of our end step, we untap each creature we control with a counter on it. So our ability to put counters on things is not a lot of the cards in our deck, but the Doctor herself does give us the ability to do it. And it's not like it's such a rare thing in our deck that this won't come up as well. So the 13th Doctor giving us a way to not really give things vigilance, but we can attack with our creatures and then untap them, assuming they didn't die in combat, is sort of like giving them vigilance in a way, so that they're similar to Aloy. I like that. The Research Craft, once it gets to 3 counters, draws us a card every time we cast an artifact spell. Osgood gives us a clue every time we cast a spell from somewhere other than our hand. Traxos gets untapped every time we cast a historic spell, and Kappa Cannoneer gets a counter and becomes unblockable every time we have an artifact enter under our control, including the Cannoneer itself. And those are our payoffs. We have a little bit more in this synergy section. These are cards that, rather than rewarding us, they care about what we care about in this deck. For example, Adaptive Omni Tool, Brotherhood Vertibird, Master of Ethereum, Uther's Research Craft, and Filigree Attendant all have a power or power and toughness or power toughness boost based on the number of artifacts we control. Number of artifacts, number of artifacts, number of artifacts, number of artifact, each artifact, and number of artifacts. There you go. We also have Thought Monitor, which has affinity for artifacts, giving us the ability to make it, to cast it for cheaper, so we also care about the number of artifacts there. Metalwork Colossus is sort of super affinity. It gives us a discount on itself based on the total mana value of all of our non-creature artifacts. We've seen Urza's Battlethopter, Liberator, which gives all of our artifact spells flash, which is pretty good. And Emery, we haven't seen yet. Emery, Lurker of the Loch, is 2 and a blue for a 1/2 legendary Merfolk Wizard with affinity for artifacts. Later printings of Emery, other than this one we have here, have that actually printed on her. Affinity, as we've seen with Thought Monitor, makes it so Emery costs a generic mana less for each artifact we control, so she's going to usually just cost a single blue for us in this deck. When Emery enters, we mill 4 cards, and we can tap Emery and choose target artifact card in our graveyard, and we have permission to cast it this turn. This is one of our best ways to recur things. We still pay the cost, we still have to play it at the regular time, but Emery gives us the ability to, once every turn, just tap her and recast something from the graveyard. Pretty great. That is our synergy section. Next up is our pump section. These are cards that make all of our creatures bigger, and we have seen all but one of these. So Adaptive Omni Tool makes the equipped creature get +1/+1 for each artifact we control. Chrome Dome gives all of our artifact creatures, other than itself, +1/+0. Steel Overseer and Iron Spider can both be tapped to put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature we control, or each artifact creature and or vehicle we control. Master of Ethereum gives all of our other artifact creatures +1/+1. 13th Doctor puts a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures whenever we cast a spell from somewhere other than our hand. The Thunderous Velocipede has all of our vehicles and creatures enter with at least 1 extra counter, sometimes with 3. Avaya gives us the ability to put a creature or vehicle from our hand onto the battlefield, and if it was an artifact, it comes with 2 1/1 counters. Verdurous Gearhulk lets us distribute 4 1/1 counters. Vivian Reed, if we can ultimate her, gives all of our creatures +2/+2. Good grief. And finally, we have Displaced Dinosaurs. 5 and double green for a 7/7 dinosaur. It's not an artifact, but it's still big. It says, as a historic permanent you control enters, it becomes a 7/7 dinosaur creature in addition to its other types. So this is actively bad for some of our permanents, like our Metalwork Colossus. It would not be a 10/10 anymore. It would be a 7/7 dinosaur. But 7 is still pretty great, especially if we are casting a Soul Ring and it comes in as a 7/7 dinosaur that I guess on a later turn we tap for mana. any historic permanent. Our commander coming in after Displaced Dinosaurs makes Aloy into a 7/7, because Aloy is legendary and therefore historic. So Ovaya is no longer a 1/2 if it comes in after the dinosaurs. Ovaya is a 7/7. The 13th Doctor is a 7/7. Master of Ethereum is a 7/7. Yeah. The dinosaurs helps us in some ways, hurts us in others, and it's just a lot of fun. It changes sort of the texture of the game. I always like to have at least a couple of cards, or at least one card, that make the game play a little bit differently once it comes out. So there we go. That is our pump section. Next is our evasion. Garrick's Uprising gives all of our creatures trample. Ovaya gives all of our creatures that are attacking our opponents, which is to say all of our creatures, trample. Vivian Reed, I guess technically it does not work if we attack a planeswalker that our opponent controls, only the opponent. Worth noting, I guess that's the distinction there. Vivian, if we ultimate her, gives all of our creatures trample, thanks to that emblem. And Cyberdrive Awakener lets all of our artifact creatures fly. Sweet. After evasion, we have our protection section. Collective Resistance can give one of our creatures hexproof and indestructible. Padim gives all of our artifacts hexproof. Vivian, if we ultimate her, can give all of our creatures indestructible with this emblem. And we're also running the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots is 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste might be relevant in this deck because we have a lot of big creatures. Hexproof is great for us to put on Aloy, so we don't have to spend a turn recasting her rather than spending our mana casting other big artifact spells. So yeah, the Swifties are great for us. That's our protection section. We have a small recursion section. We've already seen these. The Indomitable, if we have 3 tapped vehicles, we can cast it from our graveyard. Metalwork Colossus can also recur itself if we sacrifice 2 artifacts. We can put it back in our hand. But mostly, this is about Emery, letting us cast our artifact spells from our graveyard. Each turn, we tap her. Our last section of spells is our token section. It's just here to collect all the cards that put tokens into play for us. Chrome Dome can give us the ability to have a hasty, sack it at the end step, token copy of any other artifact we control. It's pretty great. It lets us put tokens in that are just other creatures that we're probably wanting. That seems good. Many of our historic permanents are not legendary, so we can use this for an additional Sharding Sphinx or Mirror Battlesphere, whatever we need. But it does say artifact we control, so I guess if we really wanted to, we could pay 5, make a copy of our Soul Ring, and immediately tap the Soul Ring. That's a possibility. Seems like that would be crazy, but what if we have Displaced Dinosaurs in play? Now we've got a Soul Ring and a Chrome Dome. We play the dinosaurs. We untap, pay 5, make a copy of the Soul Ring. That gives us a copy that comes in as a 7/7 trampling dinosaur. And then we attack with it. We're going to sack it on our end step. Yeah, Chrome Dome gives us a lot of value here for our tokens. Sai makes Thopters whenever we cast an artifact spell. Osgood comes in with a token copy of itself. Thopter Spy Network, as long as we have an artifact in our upkeep, we make a 1/1 Thopter. Rootwire Amalgam can make a copy of itself, sort of. Not really. It's a 3 times as big, basically, Golem token. The Sphinx makes us some blue Thopters when our artifact creatures deal combat damage to players. The Battle Sphere makes us Mirror when it comes in. The Triplicate Titan leaves behind 3 broken pieces of itself. And the Ancient Stone Idol makes a copy, or makes a token, that's half as strong, just as tough, and also tramples. But it dies. Cool. Those are our tokens, and that is every spell in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our lands right now, starting with our basic lands. We're running 18 basics, 8 forests, and 10 islands. We're using the Dominaria 2018 art because it has the mega structures in the back. Kind of reminds me of everything I read about the Horizon series. Not 100% the same, but kind of similar, and also beautiful Titus Lunter art either way. 18 basics. You could definitely go lower on this if you want to put in more powerful dual lands, and we'll talk about that as we go through the deck. Starting with the Rain-Slicked Copse. This is a bicycle land. It is a forest island. That is to say, it's a dual-typed land, so if we find this with Farseek, because Farseek can find islands, this is going to come in tapped anyway, so we might as well find this with Farseek, have it come in tapped, and then we untap, and we've got access to both green and blue mana. However, we can also cycle it for 2, meaning when it's in our hand, we can pay 2 generic and discard it to draw a card. Something we might do late in the game if we don't need any more lands and we draw this, or if we're just desperate for a card. the Cops is there to help us. So notably, it has basic types, even though it isn't a basic land. The reason that might be relevant is for things like Hinterland Harbor. This is a check land. It's a land that taps for green or blue and comes in tapped unless we control a forest or an island. So we have 18 basics, but the Rain-Slicked Copse has basic types. It's a forest on an island, so if it's in play, the harbor will come in untapped. We have a Tango land as well, which we'll see in a moment. That means we've got 20 cards in our deck that have basic types, the basics and the 2 dual type lands I just mentioned. So it's pretty likely that our harbor is going to come in untapped. If you wanted to run something that may be slightly more consistent, Dreamroot Cascade is a slow land. It's something that comes in untapped as long as we have any 2 other lands in play or more once it comes in. It is a little more expensive. The slow lands have been dropping in price, and I'm glad for that. I think they're actually even coming back in Secrets of Strixhaven, which is about to drop very soon as this video goes live. So nice. I'm sure those are going to drop in price. I hope they do because they're really fun. But still, this is 36 cents at time of recording, so the check lands are even cheaper. And if you wanted to upgrade Rain-Slicked Copse, Breeding Pool, the shock land, is a nice option, just much more expensive, of course. We're running both filter lands in our colors. Overflowing Basin is a land with the same text as our Simic Signet. Pay 1, tap, make a green and a blue. So it filters for us, gives us our colors. We also have Flooded Grove, which is a land that taps for colorless mana, or we can pay a green and a blue into it and tap it to either make double green, double blue, or one of each. Pretty great for us. Usually we tap it for colorless since we can tap it without having to pay anything into it. And if we need, to fix our mana, we've got the ability to do so. But the one thing that's notable here is we cannot make colored mana with this land at all unless we have colored mana to pay into it. So if all we have open is, colorless mana, we can only make colorless mana with the Grove, as opposed to the Basin, which doesn't need any particular kind of mana to make colored mana. So a little bit of a nice benefit here. Both have a good place in our deck. We're running these 8 fixing lands. Of course, we're playing Command Tower. Command Tower is Arcane Signet as a land, if you want to think of it that way. It taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so it taps for blue or for green. It comes in untapped. Excellent. An untapped duel sounds like something I would run even if it came in tapped. For example, Path of Ancestry. It comes in tapped and has the same text as our Command Tower, except it also says whenever we cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry one. So, of course, our commander shares creature types with itself. Our commander is a human warrior, so we can cast our commander with the Path of Ancestry mana and get a free scry. We also have 4 other humans in this deck and 1 other warrior. The Kappa Cannoneer is a warrior. Did you remember it was a warrior? I didn't. But that means we've got 5 cards plus our commander for this tapped duel to give us a free scry from. Pretty good. We are running Blighted Woodland. This is our Myriad Landscape for the deck. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and a green and tap and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this is an untapped land that if we pay 4 mana into it, including a green, and tap it and sack it, we get to double Rampant Growth. It's a slow bit of acceleration, but it does accelerate us because it turns 1 land drop into 2. I chose this over Myriad Landscape because this can tap for mana the moment it comes down, and we have some expensive stuff in our deck. So if we draw this late, we want to be able to use it for mana right away if we're desperate for that mana. And anytime we're not desperate for it, we can always crack it and get some colored mana sources into play when we need them. Pretty good. We're also running Temple of the False God. Not everyone loves this card, but I think this is perfect for the kind of decks I build. And I mean, come on, this is a $62 deck. It's relatively budget for the kind of things people are looking for. This is a land that comes in untapped and taps for 2 colorless mana. That's like Soul Ring. It's a soul land. It just can't be activated at all unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so 5 or more including itself. So while this isn't great if you get your opening hand and it's like a forest and the Temple of the False God and no other mana sources, maybe you want to mulligan that. But if you get this out on turn 5, it's probably going to push you from having 4 mana to having 6, which is great. If you get it out late game, it's still really useful. If you ramp toward this, it's not terrible. Yeah, solid card. Beyond that, we have 4 artifact lands in our deck. Darksteel Citadel is an indestructible land that taps for colorless. Tangled Pool Bridge is an indestructible dual land that it comes in tapped, but it taps for either of our colors, green or blue. Then we have Scene of the Synod, which is an artifact land that just taps for blue, and Tree of Tales, which is an artifact land that just taps for green. All 4 of these lands are artifacts. They are not artifact spells, so anything that triggers when we would cast an artifact spell does not trigger when we play this. But they are artifacts in that they can be sacrificed to something like Sai if we want to draw cards off of them. They count when we are looking at our Uthos Research Craft or our Brotherhood Vertibird to see the number of artifacts we have. We can tap these. The number of artifacts we have is the power of those creatures, so we count these toward that. Yeah, pretty sweet. Nice to have these things. Plus, of course, they're non-basic lands, so they count for the card that cares about those. We are running Yavimaya Coast. This is a pain land. It is the same as our Talisman of Curiosity. It taps for colorless, or it taps for a red or a green if we are willing to let it do a damage to us in the process. Everything I said about the Talisman is true here. This is even better because it is in our land base. Pretty good. If you want to upgrade this, I suppose you could upgrade to Willow Rush Verge. The Verge lands are getting played in Standard right now. They're terrific lands. Much more expensive. But yeah, would be fine to upgrade that way. Temple of Mystery is a scry land. It comes in tapped, lets us scry one when it does, and then it's a tapped duel. Perfect. You want to upgrade this? The Surveil land Hedge Maze is where you want to go. Again, pretty expensive, but it's an option. We have Sodden Verdure, which I mentioned earlier. This is our Tango land. It's a forest island, just like our Bicycle land is, so it taps for green or blue natively, and it does come in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. Again, 18 cards in this deck are basic lands, so more than a sixth of our deck. So it's pretty unlikely that this is going to come in tapped. I don't know about pretty unlikely. I think our Czech land, our Hinterland Harbor, is likelier to come in untapped. This might come in tapped, and if it does, that's fine. It's also great for us to fetch with Farseek. But if you do want to upgrade it, again, Breeding Pool, the Shock land, is a good option to do so. Finally, we have these 5 utility lands. Archway of Innovation is a land that enters tapped unless we control an island. That includes our 2 typed duels. It taps for blue, and if we pay a blue and tap it, the next spell we cast this turn has Improvise, the same way that our Kappa Cannoneer does. So a pretty nice way to surprise accelerate ourselves out. We can tap down our artifact creatures we weren't otherwise using, or maybe our equipment, like our Swiftfoot boots. We can tap that since it doesn't matter if it's tapped. It does its thing either way. So yeah, Archway of Innovation is a nice way to get a little bit more acceleration in our land base if we happen to need it for a spell that has a bunch of generic mana cost that we can put our artifacts toward. Buried Ruin is an untapped land that taps for colorless, and if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we can return an artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Nice little bit of recursion here for us. Just a little tiny bit of utility in our land base. The cost of inclusion is so low, we might as well run it. Demolition Field is next. As I often say, the kind of decks that I build for this channel are intended for a certain level of pod, a certain power level. And I have found in those pods, people don't want to lose their lands. It's a completely fair way to play Magic. You don't want to lose your resources if the whole game is a resource management thing. But you do have to have a way to answer threats, because Magic is a game of interaction. So Demolition Field is a way of answering dangerous, problematic lands that either help your opponent too much, like a Rogue's Passage in a Voltron deck, or hurt our ability to win the game or to defeat our opponents. For example, like a Labyrinth of Scophos, stopping our attackers from being able to do their damage, or, a Maze of Ith, that kind of thing. Demolition Field is my favorite answer to that, and it's fine to have one thing in your deck that can blow up lands, especially if the lands that's blown up gets replaced. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Demolition Field is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that our opponent controls. That opponent then gets to look for a basic, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. It doesn't even come in tapped. We get to do the same. So neither we nor they are down a land, even though we lost our demo field and they lost their non-basic, but we both have a basic in play, assuming we had them left in our library, that is untapped. We can tap for mana right away. We just answered the threat. Totally fine. I think this is completely unobjectionable, and it was reprinted on Foundations, so very inexpensive to and like available to get in your collection now. Mosswarp Bridge is next. This is a land that comes in tapped, and once it's untapped, taps for green, but it has Hideaway 4, meaning when it enters, we look at the top 4 cards of our library and exile 1 face down under the bridge. Then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and at any time we have creatures with a total power of 10 or greater under our control, we can pay a green and tap the bridge to play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So another way for us to trigger Paradox on our 13th Doctor, for example, or on our Osgood. This is a way for us to sneak out a creature, because it does not say activate only as a sorcery. And it's pretty easy for us to get up to a total of 10 or greater power in this deck of big things. So yeah, pretty nice. Finally, I mentioned Rogue's Passage, so we're running it ourselves because we have a bunch of things that are big and we want to trigger our attack triggers and not always have to worry about maybe losing our creature in the process. So Rogue's Passage is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. Mostly good for our creatures, but we can use this politically by making a deal with an opponent, saying, hey, you leave me alone for a turn, I will make your creature unblockable when you attack, our mutual opponent. And the person we're making a deal with might say, sure, go ahead and activate it. And we say, no. You have to attack first, because if I make your creature unblockable before you attack, you could attack me and I wouldn't be able to block it. Well, I don't want to be betrayed. And they might say, okay, that's fine. I will trust you. I will declare this attack against opponent B. Then we make their creature unblockable because we are an honorable person who can win with a good deck and doesn't need to trick anyone. It's also really fun to use Rogue's Passage when no one expects it. Maybe opponent B is attacking opponent C, and we're like, wow, they've got a huge commander there. They could win with commander damage. Too bad they're going to get blocked. Oh, wait. We activate a Rogue's Passage, make their commander unblockable. Now it's not going to get blocked. And so either it's going to get removed because opponent C is going to be forced to use a removal spell, which helps us too because this big commander is getting killed, or maybe opponent C just dies from that unblocked creature, and either way it helps us, and all we've had to spend in terms of resources is some of our mana, whereas opponent B had to spend all their creatures in their attack. So also, no one expects you to Rogue's Passage another person's creature when they're attacking yet another person without declaring it. It's just always a fun moment at the table. But yeah, it's in the deck for those things, but mostly for our own creatures, and that's still pretty good. And that sums it up. If you'd like to request a commander deck and you are the patient sort, let me know in the comments. I'll see what I can get to when I can get to it, when it's in my queue. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of the channel. It's something I've been doing recently. Seems neat. It's a way for you to see my decks go live before, they're scheduled to. But most of all, what I'd like you to do is remember that Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.